So alignment is pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, basically it's where something aligns with something else, either on a vertical or a horizontal axis or at the edge of the page. Things align either where they start visually, where they end visually, or in the center point. So really it's a pretty simple notion to wrap your head around, but there's other different considerations of alignment, and that's what we're after. So let's go ahead and go through. We'll go through this lecture. We'll go through a couple of the examples in the book. We'll go through some examples in the course announcements, and then we'll just kind of wrap it up here. So alignment occurs when any visual elements on a page line up with any other visual elements on a page. Now, a really great rule of thumb, guys, especially for student designers, is this: in your compositions, make sure everything aligns with something. And that's a great piece of advice, because once you start to kind of gear yourself as a designer to work in that capacity where everything aligns with something, then it becomes muscle memory. Then you can start moving things accordingly. And then this is known as breaking the grid. I'm going to talk about a grid in a second. But so my best advice right now is, as student designers, just make sure everything on your pages align with something. And I'll be referring to that comment throughout the duration of this video. So now it's also important to note, alignment can be created with real lines on the page, actual real lines, or with imaginary lines, phantom lines, or what we call leading lines. We saw the examples specifically in the Russell Westbrook, remember the football ad? And we saw how the headline was placed right directly across from the quarterback's eyes. That's an imaginary line, or basically a phantom line, and we use that for alignment. So that's another example of how we can use lines. So it's important to know that lines can be visible or invisible. Now, when we talk about a grid, we talk about an underlying set of lines that help and assist us in dissecting the page in a logical way, and also with placement of elements so that we can ensure alignment. A grid is basically an invisible set of lines. So when you set your grid up, you're going to be setting it up on a layer that doesn't print, okay? Let's get further into alignment. We have absolute alignment and optical alignment. What's the difference? Well, if you set up a grid, and let's say you have your headline, and your headline's left aligned, you pull a guide out, and you guide, and then down the page, you follow that exact guide, and you start placing maybe your subhead or your body copy in exact alignment. Let's say it's left alignment. So you draw a guide, and that's exact alignment with the left margin of the headline. That's called absolute alignment. You're guiding, you're using mathematics as a principle to assist you in alignment. The option to that is called optical alignment. And optical alignment is more when you kind of eyeball things to make sure they're aligned. A good example of that would be the placement of a logo on the bottom of an ad, where you're not exactly, the logo might be irregularly shaped, so you might not have a clean left margin that you're going to place with a guide in alignment with something else on the page. So you just kind of, regularly shaped objects, you just kind of gauge them a little bit, maybe use some guides, but basically it's more of an optical alignment technique. Visually aligned objects are much easier to look at and much easier to mentally organize than objects that aren't aligned and organized in that capacity. And also it indicates that, and things in alignment also indicate that, well, if any elements belong in the same composition, there's an indication that they have a good close relationship to one another. What alignment does is alignment and grouping, as we learned, is it reinforces the page organization by grouping things and aligning them. This alignment prevents what are called saccadic movements. Saccadic movements are where your eye jumps all over the page. We don't want that. A comfortable viewing experience is one where your eyes are led through a page in a logical manner, instead of where your eye jumps around like this. Okay, again, that's called saccadic movement. It's a very important principle. Now, we talk about alignment, we talk about page alignment and typographic alignment. Now, in terms of page alignment, things always seem more organized when they're aligned and grouped logically. So think alignment in your compositions. Alignment helps establish hierarchy and order, and hierarchy and order help establish unity, and unity helps reinforce harmony. Okay, really important stuff. Okay, so we have grids. Grids are an amazing tool, and it's one we're going to talk about in a second. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at alignment in total space. So this is going to help you set up the width for your grid. So basically, it makes a lot of sense. You take that total space, the width of your composition, then you subtract the margins, all right? Then you subtract the gutters. That's the distance between the type columns on a page. Then you divide that by the number of columns you want to use, and that'll give you the width of your columns. Okay, it's a really easy formula. Try it, set this up, set up a little dummy experiment with this, and you'll see it works out perfectly for a great way to figure out what your width columns are. Publication anatomy, alignment is super important. So is the use of grids in publication design, because it establishes a rhythm. It establishes a rhythm for which the viewer can be assisted and help them guide through each page as they turn the page. Magazines use a grid, an underlying grid. So those pages in magazines are not randomly designed. They're designed based on alignment, a very, very dogmatic and strict alignment based on very dogmatic and strict use of grids that you find in any associated publication. Grids help with, and alignment helps with readability, and it helps simplify the tasks for the designer. A well-aligned page is something that is not daunting to look at. It's inviting. Something that isn't aligned, and we'll take a look at some examples, is the opposite. I do want to talk about the difference between legibility and readability. I'm going to get into that when we go into the classroom book example. But at this point, let's go ahead and talk about the grid. So a grid is really super important. What is a grid? A grid is a series of horizontal and vertical lines that are superimposed on a page that assist you in placement of, not only placement, but the size, the shape, and the placement of design elements on a composition. When I say design elements, I mean images, I mean text regarding headline, subhead, body copy, captions, and other mechanical areas of the page. So placement, again, guys, and from this moment on, as student designers, you need to know placement is not arbitrary. It's typically very, very, very well defined by the use of a grid. Okay, let's go over to the course announcements, and I want to show you something over here. This, right down here, is there's an example of what a grid might look like, how to design using the grid. There's a little history on the grid here. It's a quick read, and it's really going to help you understand why we use the grid, the historic reasons behind the grid. So take a look at that. You can link out to, there's the source for this material, so you can link out to read more. It's fascinating stuff. And then this video shows you how to set up and use a grid using InDesign. So I highly recommend reviewing this video to reinforce your understanding of how designers use grid in page design. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and jump over to week 5, alignment chapter. A couple of highlights here that I would like to draw your attention. Look at the alignment right here. It's gorgeous, isn't it? Now note the vertical alignment and the horizontal alignment as well. Look at that beautiful left margin. This is what I was calling saccadic movements. There's none here. The design is so you go right down the line. Okay, so your eye isn't jumping around anywhere. It starts here and it goes right down the line beautifully. And note the horizontal sections as well are very well planned out, as you can see in this example here. Now we jump over to this again, saccadic movements. Note that left margin, clear left margin, as opposed to this. You get to the end of here, look at that jump right there. There's another jump right there. Those are those uncomfortable saccadic movements I was speaking of. We don't want those. I don't think this is a great example, but it definitely shows how much more organized this certificate looks than this certificate, simply by pulling this area in and aligning it with the signature area, and also pulling this element in. So you can see, and then also we reconfigured this type right here. So you can see that this is a little bit more well received. Now this is the use of a grid, 3-column grid, guys, okay? And we'll show a little development there. Here's the same grid showing different configurations, okay? And take a look at that video, guys. This is all going to make such great sense. Watch this video. Watch it first once, and then watch it again. Watch it first alone before you open up InDesign. Then watch it again and work along with the video to set your grid up. But be sure to watch it first, so all of this stuff really makes much greater sense. Okay, now here's some more examples of grid, and here's some examples of what happens when you don't use a grid, and how kind of nasty these be. I'm sorry, these are actually not, see how irregular this is, and these unusual weird spaces and the shapes that are created by not adhering to the grid. So we can definitely see the advantages of adhering to a grid at this point. Here's a basic grid. Okay, this has just vertical lines, no horizontals, but the video shows you how to use horizontal lines. Let's go ahead, and there's horizontal lines and vertical lines. These are your gutters right here. These are your margins all the way around. Okay, this is really interesting, guys. Initial cap, or sometimes known as a drop cap, is a drop cap that drops down into the sentence. Then over here we have what's called a kicker. This is a tint box. It's a color behind any type on a page. Headline, of course. Pull quote. Pull quotes are great. It's a way to separate and make a little rest area in the page. Then this is called margins. 4 margins, right? Top, bottom, left, right. We have inner margins too, guys. So this 2-column spread would have basically 6 margins if it is a centerfold spread. That would be top, bottom, left, right, and then inside left, and then inside right in the center of the composition, as we can see here. Okay, and then here's some more examples. As I want to get into this right here is the examples for alignment for type. So typically we have a couple. Here's a nice, really nice little illustration of a grid. I want to get back into this type: flush left, flush right, centered, justified. Okay, so there's a difference between legibility and readability, guys. All right, legibility is basically refers to the typeface and the configuration. Are the letters legible? Not can we read them? Are they legible? Does that L look like an L? Does the word the look like the word the? That's legibility. Okay, readability is the way that the type is set. Okay, so for example, we can clearly see right here that left, flush left, left aligned, rag right, flush left type is much more readable. It's the same legibility. The letters are exact same, but this is much more readable than this centered type. Why? Because of those saccadic jumps, right? And then, of course, flush right is not as easy to read as flush left, but then again, it is easier to read than centered. The point I'm trying to make, guys, is if you're centering your type right now, I recommend this. As a student designer, stop. Stop right now and start left aligning flush right. I'm sorry, left rag right. Left align, rag right. I highly recommend you, if you are accustomed to centering your type and your composition, stop now. All right. As we learned, center alignment does nothing to engage negative space, and it's really difficult to work with, and it's equally as difficult to read. I'll show you an example right now. Okay, different kinds of alignment. You want to see that. So I'm going to take a look at that. This is one of the reasons. These are called rivers. This is justified type. Okay, these are called rivers. I've got some settings. If you guys are working on justified type and it's not working out for you, let me know. I'll give you some settings that you can use to change to adjust those rivers. Okay, more on alignment. Say definitely. This is called hung punctuation. Really important principle right here, guys. Okay, this is the difference between center. I said I want to show you an example. Now, this is what we would have seen and what we would expect to see students submitting in the first week of class, right? And a lot of students did center align their typographic compositions associated with the business card assignment. Now, we can clearly see this is much more inviting. It's much more accessible. It makes a lot of more sense. It's easier to read. It's easier to organize. It's just a much superior piece. Here, one of the reasons, guys, is those saccadic movements. Watch my cursor. We start here, then we go here, over here, over here, over here, back over here, back over here. Here, we start here, and we go right down the line. Okay? Really, really great demonstration there. Okay, and then here's some more examples of alignment. So you want to get into that. I want to end by showing this announcement image of alignment. So this looks like it's not aligned, right? But everything in here is aligned, and everything is very, very strict, almost dogmatic use of the grid, as we can see right here. Here's these grid lines. Note that everything is aligned. Okay, this 1923, for example, is aligned with the cap line of the word Bauhaus, which is set on a curve, right? So there's that alignment. Also, this center dark area right here is aligning the type in this area. it's no coincidence that this little line right here and this little line, same height as the type here. So basically what we have here is this is creating a series of repetition, which does what? Creates harmony. Okay, so note everything on this page is in alignment. Okay, guys, that's 15 minutes. I wanted to cap it off at that, so let's go ahead and do that. Any questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, or anything on alignment, please let me know. But again, at this point in summary, it's just a really great practice to make sure everything on your page aligns with something else. Okay, guys, thank you very much.